For you to be elected president, you should have at least 50 plus 1. If you clear that ceiling of 50 plus 1%, not simple majority, then you will be duly elected president of the Republic of Sierra Leone.
That is one of the changes at the center of a fierce political dispute in Sierra Leone.
Now, the main opposition, the APC, strongly objects the plan to change the presidential winning threshold from 55% to 50% plus 1.
The APC argues that the higher threshold forces presidential candidates to reach beyond their traditional political strongholds and build a broader national coalition.
So we're saying no political party should be able to win on its own in first round. So second round, you have to make coalition. And in that coalition, that is how you get other political parties involved in governance.
What we know is that the dispute is now heading towards the courts. The opposition has described the bill's passage in extremely strong terms and says it intends to challenge it before the Supreme Court.
Now, the government, however, rejects the suggestion that the reforms are politically motivated.
Just because the opposition disagrees, it means that somebody else has sinister motives. That is an outlandish accusation on its face. Anybody who pays any small attention to the details will laugh at that.
So here's the thing. We have two very different readings of the same reform. The minister finds it laughable, but Sierra Leoneans supporting the opposition's stance are not amused.
And at the heart of this crisis are two explosive issues. Why change the presidential threshold from 55% to 50% plus 1? And what would a proportional representation system mean for voters?
And beyond the politics, there is another fundamental question. Was the bill itself passed constitutionally?
I cannot wait. This is the conversation that we're having right here under the Baobab. Did you start feeling your perspective?
Yes, I started refilling my perspective.
Refilling. How is it tasting today? How does it taste?
So today, whatever I'm taking...
The Baobab drink.
My Baobab drink today tastes something known as Poyo.
Poyo.
Yes.
What's Poyo tasting like, and what does that
mean?
mean?
So if you've been to Sierra Leone before, Poyo is basically the palm wine. I know you're familiar with palm wine.
Yes.
So, but it is not palm wine. It is like palm wine, the Poyo. Now, when it is fresh, it tastes, sweet. But if you leave it to chill for a longer period, then it gives you that kick.
Somehow it sounds like the politics that is unfolding in Sierra Leone at the moment. Is that what you're trying to tell me, Judge? Because I know you always look for very, how can I say, you always speak in parables. Like
no, but of course, as we've always said, the drinks that we are having here, it's, a feeling that it gives you. And today, definitely, we want to talk about politics in Sierra Leone.
Before we get to that debate,
yes.
We always like to revisit our previous episode. And last week, we were trying to look at HIV and AIDS eradication in Africa, the Vision 2030, in West and Central Africa, where that is even achievable.
Yes, and we saw massive reactions. And shall I begin with the...
Of course,
yes.
Go ahead.
Abdul Salman Bari, he says, and he raised a very critical point, Africa can make significant progress towards ending HIV and AIDS, but doing so without international support would be extremely challenging. The real question we should be asking isn't just about aid, but whether African governments are actually willing to invest enough of their own money into their own people to make health systems sustainable.
We have this, that's quite interesting. We also have Miriam Masenga, who didn't actually hold back. She's a Facebook user.
Yes.
She was asking, why do independent countries still depend on donors for their people's health? It's sad. Governments need to stop holding endless workshops, stop flying all over the world and actually invest in medical staff and local supplies. Very interesting perspectives there. And that's exactly how we do it here under the Baobab.
So keep the comments coming because we really appreciate they are at the center of the making of this particular show.
As we always do it here under the Baobab, I need to say who I am. My name is Mimi Mefoneu. And this is, of course, our weekly show under the Baobab.
Because Mimi is using 3 names, I'll also use 3. My name is George Mark Okachi. On this show, we take Africa's complex issues and make them personal.
And we do so every Friday of the week. Always make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, DW Africa, and keep the comments coming.
Yes, so today back to Sierra Leone. The opposition says it will challenge the electoral reform bill before the Supreme Court, setting up a major fight over rules, that could reshape the country's, next presidential election, which is in 2028.
When the elections are always coming, something is always happening. In Nigeria is the same thing. The elections are coming before. In Zambia, we saw the same, a lot of reforms as well. But if you haven't been following Sierra Leonean politics closely, here is what you need to know. The ruling party actually used its majority to push this amendment bill through parliament, but it contains two highly explosive clauses that have pushed the country's democracy to a legal breaking point, and a lot of opposition leaders are also not happy about it.
Okay, so lawmakers from the main opposition party, that is the APC, actually walked out of the vote. And their argument was that the government didn't have even the required two-thirds majority to legally pass this particular legislation. Now, to help us clear the air on what is actually going on in Sierra Leone, we are speaking directly to Sierra Leone's Minister for Information and Civic Education, Chernor. Now, Mimi, and of course to our viewers and listeners, let's look at the biggest trigger in this particular bill. Now, the government wants to lower, the votes needed to win the presidency. It had the 55%, and Sierra Leone has 55% for you to be declared a presidential winner. That was before. After this particular law, after this particular legislation,
right,
they want to lower it from 55% to 50% plus one.
Yes. We want to try to understand why it was put there in the first place. That 55% bar wasn't random. You know that.
Yeah.
It was written into the 1991 Constitution right as the country was dealing with deep, painful ethno-regional divisions. Now, the founders wanted to force any future president to build huge national coalitions across, different regions rather than just relying on their ethnic strongholds to win an election. But also, the exact card that the government is playing is now to justify lowering this number. They say that 50% plus one threshold brings stability and actually saves money. But the opposition argues that lowering the bar allows the party to win single-handedly and also running the spirit of inclusive, governance in the country. So that's their fear.
Yeah, and here is where I want to provoke your thought, you also as a listener and as a viewer. And it is a classical democratic dilemma, financial efficiency versus national unity, as you're putting it, Mimi.
Another question is, why now?
Yes, and so when I sat with the minister, Chernor, that was the very first question I asked. Why is it necessary to change the historic rule right now?
We've followed due process. We've done additional extensive consultations. We received input from every section of our public, including the opposition. This is simply a process that's gone through how it's supposed to go through, and it's come up for a vote in Parliament.
But Minister, the opposition walkout during the passage of this law strongly suggests that broad political consultation and consensus were not fully achieved. Now, for our community members following these developments, tell us, why is lowering the threshold from the 55% to 50% plus one generating so much controversy? Okay,
so two things. One is, I think you just made an extraordinary leap that there will not be any issue if you had gone through due process. That is an assumption that's not supported by the facts that I just laid out. And we've gone through a process of extensive consultation. There's been a disagreement, and even the APC on the eve of the vote put out a statement saying that they support broadly the recommendations and they are in favor of reviewing and reforming the Constitution. So I just want to be clear. Now, for years, the stated written position of the opposition was that it is a waste of money, it is not best standard, it's a waste of time to have a provision that has this impossible threshold of 55%. We should bring it down to 50 plus one. This is a position that we had national consensus on For years, the opposition has changed their mind. They want
Minister Barr, the opposition is not here to defend or deny that position. We would appreciate if you directly address the specific concerns they have raised.
Yes, sir. But that's why I'm giving you the clarity. And I'm saying the threshold that we currently have in Sierra Leone is it's an outlier. That's why in our proposal, we said, and that's also what was decided at the tripartite between the opposition and the government that was signed and approved. You can independently confirm this, include that we should move to 50+1 plus additional safeguards to ensure that you get at least 20% of over half of the district.
Let's pause for a second so that we are all on the same page. Under this new legislation, does a presidential candidate require a simple majority of votes cast, or must they secure exactly 50% plus one vote?
So the proposal that was voted by our parliament was that we should transition from the very high threshold of 55% to now, for you to be elected president, you should have at least 50+1, not simple majority. Then you will be duly elected president of the Republic of Sierra Leone.
Well, now that is very clear, Minister, historical context show that the 55% threshold was established as a nation-building safeguard, a deliberate mechanism to bridge deep ethno-regional divisions and guarantee, and I want to underline this word, highly legitimate national mandate. When critics argue that, lowering this bar to 50%+1 weakens the fabric of your democracy, why wouldn't you want to agree with them?
50+1 is absolute majority, and I've said that it is an outlier. The provision of 51% is an outlier, and it was the written position of the opposition. It was their written position, again, weeks ago. And again, democracy is about good governance, and there are best practices around the world. We wanted additional safeguards to ensure that you don't become a regional party. In the conversations with them, they said, no, if we're going to do 50+1, let's just stick to 50+1 with no additional encumbrances. And we agreed, and we put it forward, and now they rejected it. And again, the notion that somehow this is about entrenching the current president is false on its face, because the president is not contesting for a third term, and the president is not going to be affected by these changes.
And you would agree that laws are crafted for posterity and must respond to a country's unique political realities. So if many Sierra Leoneans feel the 55% rule uniquely works for them and for the country's political landscape, wouldn't lowering it to even 50%+1 encourage parties to retreat to local ethnic bases rather than, building broad national coalitions?
No, we're not. And as I've said, democracy is about what is best practice across the world. You look at also what others have done. And that's why we didn't do simple majority. We said, no, you must at least get the support of more than half of the country. What we take issue with is this notion that somehow just because the opposition disagrees, it means that somebody else has sinister motives. That is an outlandish accusation on its face. Anybody who pays any small attention to the details will laugh at that.
Outlandish accusation. And Mimi, when the going gets tougher, the tough gets going, right?
Yeah. And, you are hinting us about taking a bit of, I should say a break. Hydration break. Oh. Thank you, George, for reminding me, actually. This Poyo drink that we've just had is telling us that we should cool down a little bit.
It's important.
Get to know our guest a little bit on a personal level. When he's not talking politics and changes, electoral reforms in the country and bills that have been passed in Parliament, what else is he doing? This is the rapid fire question segment.
Freetown or New York?
Freetown, please.
Writing a fiery opinion piece or drafting a government press release?
Opinion piece.
Activists or politicians? Who is harder to manage?
Activist, for sure.
An hour at the beach or an hour reading a book?
I'm a beach guy.
I like how you put it. So what is harder, fighting the establishment from outside or running it from inside?
Both.
Complete this sentence. The biggest culture shock moving from civil society to government ministry was?
Gridlock.
And what do you miss so much in your past life before you joined government?
I had a life. Now in government, I barely do. Everything I do is scrutinized, and people think, even if I drink tea, they think it's their money that I'm drinking, and otherwise I will not be drinking.
And now that you're mentioning drinks and perhaps food, what is your absolute go-to comfort food after a grueling cabinet meeting?
It's a special dish that my mom prepares. It's called pemaun. It's made with potato leaves. It's a very special Mende dish. My mom is Mende.
And what is the last text message you sent to your wife before turning off your phone at night?
I love you.
And what is the one book you believe every young Sierra Leonean must read?
I think every Sierra Leonean should read The Agony of a Nation. It's an account of what went wrong in our country between the late 70s and early 90s, and how corruption, mismanagement, nepotism, and tribalism basically put the country down. I think it's instructive reading.
That triggers my interest to want to read the book also. Yeah.
But I was quite intrigued when you were asking about whether he would prefer the capital of Sierra Leone or New York.
Yeah, this was, coming from the fact that he was in exile in the US. So I thought like maybe he has some sort of allegiance to the United States.
Home would always be home, Judge.
Of course, home will always be home. Now, back to the controversy. The government says these reforms are meant to, modernize Sierra Leone's electoral reforms system.
But the opposition is saying otherwise because they believe that, this reform didn't have enough consensus. They didn't have, it doesn't have enough votes in parliament, so they didn't back it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and for, benefit of those who didn't follow, the APC, that is the opposition, in Sierra Leone, walked out before the vote and disputed the legality of what happened thereafter. They argue that, such significant changes that touches on the constitution requires a 2/3 majority.
So the government actually disagrees, and now the Supreme Court in Sierra Leone would now have to decide whether is it the government that is right or is it the opposition that is right?
Yeah, so of course we are not lawyers, but we spoke to legal experts, and we are told that there are 3 scenarios that could play out. Now, the scenario 1 would be the court totally rejecting the bill and sending it back to Parliament.
Another could be that they could simply just decide that a referendum takes place where Sierra Leoneans get to decide whether this should be allowed in the country or not.
Yeah, because it is a constitutional bill, and it's Sierra Leoneans who should determine if they want that change in the electoral reforms. And also maybe the 3rd scenario would be the court altogether agreeing with the government, saying that of course it followed the due process in passing that legislation in Parliament.
So that would simply mean that the opposition doesn't have a case.
Yes.
But we have a big question here to ask.
Yes. The question is, was the government so afraid to, build consensus with the opposition?
When we were talking, I did say that your question suggests to me that you have opinions. I'm from your sector. I've been in the sector.
It may not be
so afraid. Were you paying attention to the process? How can we be afraid?
Well, as host of Under the Baobab, we don't push personal agendas or opinions, Minister, and our responsibility is to amplify the voices and concerns of our community members. I want to make that clear.
You've loaded the question with so many false assumptions. It's actually disappointing.
Yeah, and that's precisely why you are here, Minister. If you believe any of these assertions are false, this is your platform. And I mean, you are the information minister.
I'm saying too, at least let's start the conversation. You can ask what led to the simple majority. But then to suggest that we were afraid, I think it's a framing that is problematic. But let me respond to the question anyway. We have a constitution that determines how votes are carried out in our parliament. But when it comes to the constitution, you're right. There's been the bill itself, the entire bill, requires a 2/3 vote. The APC walked away after the first vote because they said each provision must meet the 2/3 threshold. There's a disagreement. We don't believe that's the case. We believe the bill itself should have been subjected to the 2/3 threshold, which we were willing to do. And we've pushed them, we've challenged them, allowed the vote. We know because our laws require that the votes be conducted by secret ballot. They don't trust their own members because their members know that this has been their position for a long time. These were reasonable provisions. These are progressive provisions. The current revisions that we have, and if they allow their own members to vote, they know, as much as I do, and I've said this multiple times in interviews, that they will have lost the vote. We will have gotten the 2/3. We have 97 total that voted. We needed just 2 more from their ranks to be able to switch to get the 2/3. They walked away. And then the speaker then ruled that in these present circumstances, he's going to allow these votes to go forward, and then said he's inviting the Supreme Court to make a determination.
So, Mimi, as it stands, the Supreme Court justices are expected not just to decide on the legal technicality, but, they are holding the future of the entire country, in their hands, and the democratic future in their hands. So to help us understand how and gauge the feeling of Sierra Leoneans, our reporter Mutala Kamala and Claudia Anthony gathered their reactions, and this included speaking to, the leader of APC and of course, the common Sierra Leoneans.
So having seen the attempt by government to increase districts in the southeast, the APC came back to the point that we do need nationwide representation, but we can't do it in a manner which could eventually lead to violence and ethnic cleansing. So let us go back to the 55% nationwide. That way we get the national feel, but without bringing in the risk of elections violence.
To start from the outset, I happen to be a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. It is surprising to know that the 55% threshold has been moribund, obsolete, and old. It does not stand a chance of civilized countries. In the entire ECOWAS, it is only Sierra Leone that still seeks for 55% to make presidency.
Government want to ensure that they cut down the expenditure during the electionary process. The fight of doing rerun elections when we have an NP who happens to pass off during his time in office. So one way it's good, but for another school of thought, we'll see it's basically not promoting proper democracy in Africa.
The bill is fine. For some other people, it's fine. And some other people, it's not good. But as for me, I don't want them to pass the bill because the bill is not good for me.
And now, Mimi, to the second contentious issue is the issue of proportional representation. Now, the amended law introduces new voting system for parliament, and it essentially flips how people choose their leaders.
Yes, which is also something that they are fighting, the opposition is fighting, even the government about. Let's try to break it down a little bit so that people can understand that under the constituency-based system, voters are going to choose their candidate to represent them, in a particular area. And we have the other option, which is the party list proportional representation system, where seats are allocated to political parties according to their share of the vote, with candidates selected through that particular party list.
Yes, and this is very important for you to know that people were supporting this new system called proportional representation, and I should qualify by saying that, of course, it is a system that has, worked in other countries, but whether it works for Sierra Leone is subject of Sierra Leoneans to decide, and of course, with that case at the Supreme Court. Now, the supporters say that proportional representation can produce a parliament that, sort of reflects an overall vote more accurate. And we're talking about a parliament that, constitutes, more women in it, more young people in it, because when the party draws the list, then it can naturally, contain these, special interest groups.
But the danger here, according to opposition MPs and opposition party members in Sierra Leone, is that it could actually weaken, the power that the voters actually have and empower political parties more. Is that something that you discussed with our guests to find out whether there is, how the government is taking all of these aspects into consideration?
Let's listen in. Proportional representation system for legislative elections. It is also another very sticky issue. Some say it takes away voters' power. Why is your government taking power away from local communities?
Who writes your questions, man? I'm wow.
Minister, I want to repeat for the record again. These questions originate directly from our audience. Our duty as journalists, and I know you appreciate that, is to probe in the public interest, and many citizens are demanding answers to these specific concerns. It's not, coming from me or from our team.
Over 90 countries around the world practice a form of PR. A basic Google search tells you there are multiple types of PR, including ones that don't hand the keys to the party bosses. What we have said is there are two basic types. There's a closed list where the party decides on who it is and where the list is. And there's an open list, which you can take to the people in primaries and say, look, we're going to get a list of 10 people that will be voted for in this district. Now, those 10 people can contest in a primary. The people can have a say on who should be number one, who should be number two, and we can agree on certain principles to ensure, for example, there's greater inclusion, to ensure that women's voices are more reflected, that minorities are more reflected. And every time we have proportional representation, women's numbers go up. When we have the first past the post, the numbers go down. We're not taking powers away from the people. We're actually strengthening inclusion. We're moving towards what you're asking about earlier to ensure that, imagine in a country like ours, as diverse as ours, you want to have elections where somebody gets 51% of the votes in one district, but they get 100% of the seats. What that leads to is you just have entrenched political positions. Minorities have less incentive to go to vote in the first place because think, why am I even going to vote? Even if I get 30% of the votes, my vote is not going to count.
And I'm glad you brought this issue of 30% gender quota. And critics argue that the government is weaponizing gender equality. And the argument is that you contained it inside the bill so that you can make the entire amendment process sellable. Is it true?
Yes, I actually say yes, we are. We think it's a good weapon for our country. We think it's a good weapon for our democracy to insist on having 30%, a minimum of 30% women. We actually want to be remembered as a government that fought for and weaponized in a positive sense the idea that we want to insist that in a country where 52% of the electorate are women, that we cannot go back to the days where we only had 10 or 12% of women in our parliament.
Now, your views are always at the center of our conversation, like we said in the beginning. And we actually did ask on our Facebook page whether you support the electoral reforms contained in the controversial, we know it's controversial, Constitutional Amendment Bill 2025 in Sierra Leone. And we had a lot of responses.
Yes.
Would you want to look at some of them?
Yeah, let me go through it. And we have Nati Kamara. You're saying, I support the proposed 50% plus one threshold. Beyond the political debate, we also need to consider the enormous time, logistics, and financial resources required to conduct a runoff election.
We also have Tuabe Koruma. The person says that they support the change, arguing that 50 plus 1 could reduce the cost and tensions associated with runoff elections.
Yes, and also we have Priscilla Opar, who argued, and this is in a way of a caution, women deserve meaningful political representation, but constitutional reforms should not be rushed through simply because they should sound, progressive. Every change must be judged on whether it strengthens democracy, not whose political party interest it serves. So after everything we've had today, what's the big take away, Mimi, from this conversation?
For me, it actually comes down to the issue of trust. Changing election rules is one thing. Getting people to trust those changes that you are making is also another, especially the opposition.
I couldn't agree more. And now the Supreme Court in Sierra Leone may have to decide whether the rules were followed.
But we want to hear from you out there. Is 50% plus 1 enough to elect a president? Or should Sierra Leone keep the 55% threshold?
And what about proportional representation? Would you rather vote directly for your member of parliament or vote for a political party?
Please tell us your thoughts in the comments, as always.
And always remember that my name is George Okachi.
And I am here reminding them like your name is Mimi and my name is Mimi Mefoneu. Until next time, goodbye.